You're listening to episode 247 of Mitolife Radio. I'm your host, Matt Blackburn, and today I'm back to talk about water once again. I've done a solo show before on drinking water, but I wanted to add some new information to that, some information regarding acid rain that I've never shared before that isn't common knowledge. And really the goal is to bring some clarity to this topic of water filtration. We've all heard the phrase, invest in a filter or become a filter. That goes for air quality, but that also goes for water. And when I got into health back in 2010, I focused mostly on air filtration, water filtration, and grounding, often called earthing. Those were the three areas that I focused on, and they had a major impact on my quality of life and upgrading my health. I've noticed over the years when I initiate a conversation about drinking water quality and water filtration, I've seen a lot of people get programmed, whether it's alkaline water ionizers or distilled water. I would say those two are the biggest camps. And then you have the raw living spring water group, which I think is smaller than both of those combined from my observation over the years, probably because it takes so much effort to drive out usually several hours round trip, fill up your glass carboys like I used to do, filling up 30 to 40 gallons at a time, but really labor intensive and time intensive and just not practical for most people. Since around 2013, the message that I've been sharing is that you would think that unfiltered spring water bubbling up from deep under the ground is pure because it's getting filtered through a lot of bedrock and maybe hundreds of feet potentially before it reaches the aquifer. I bought into that for a few years until I started to delve deeper. And now I can see it with my own eyes because I don't need a study. I don't need a blog post. I don't need a book. I can go downstairs to what I call my control room, where I have my main water line coming into the house with the shutoffs and my whole home filtration unit, which is very minimal because I'm on a spring. But the raw water going through the PEX, it's a clear tube. I can see the iron accumulation, and you'd think, oh, that's great. I need more iron. I've been anemic my whole life. It sounds like a great iron supplement. Well, this iron is different. Iron in water is present in largely two forms, it's either soluble ferrous iron or insoluble ferric iron. In water containing ferrous iron, you can't see it because the iron is completely dissolved in the water, but the iron that you can see is called ferric or oxidized iron, which does not dissolve in the water. Now, steak actually contains some ferric iron, and iron supplements are often in the form of ferric citrate or ferric sulfate. And I've played around with supplementing iron, and it's really not fun. There are a lot of unpleasant side effects to supplementing iron, and one of them is constipation. So what if your chronic constipation, or maybe you're skipping days of having bowel movements, that could be caused largely by this constant influx of iron in your water. I always emphasize with this information, traveling and drinking spring water from around the US or around the world, not a big issue. I'm mainly concerned about your everyday drinking water because it's what we do most of the time every day that contributes to these chronic health conditions. So let's take a step back and ask, why is iron even in the water, especially natural sources like wells and springs? Well, it's called acid rain. And acid rain is created from the combustion of fossil fuels. And it either falls to the earth through rain, which is what you would think of term acid rain, but it can also fall, and 50% of it does fall, through the process called dry deposition. So even if it's not raining, these acids could still be raining down invisibly from the sky. And there are dire consequences for our lungs and the air quality, for the soil and the whole soil ecology that allows plants to function properly and uptake nutrients and fight off infections and uptake minerals. And then it seeps down into the earth, getting into our aquifers, altering our drinking water and bathing water. And we know that acid rain leaches metals from the soil, including aluminum, copper, iron, and other metals. We often don't think about transdermal application of these metals. And I've played around with rubbing copper sulfate on the skin, and you definitely absorb it. But when you're dosing these metals in unknown quantities for an unknown period of time, I think that's where a lot of nutritional imbalances come from. And then a question to ask is, how many of those people getting dosed with copper, aluminum, and iron in their drinking and bathing water are sweating in a sauna 3 to 4 times a week consistently, sweating them out? And then furthermore, those same people supplementing with zinc and vitamin C and the other supplements that would help to balance out those exposures. I would guess it's a very small percentage. It does depend on where you live. So if you live in an area where there's lots of limestone in the ground, then the acidic rainwater can be neutralized naturally, because as it flows through the limestone will dissolve calcium and magnesium, these alkaline minerals, making the rainwater less acidic. But if you're in an area that contains more granite or sand or another mineral besides limestone, it won't affect the pH level at all, and you'll have still acid water traveling into your aquifers and then through your plumbing and ultimately into your body. And I want to clarify, limestone itself is not a mineral. It's a rock made up of minerals, and those minerals primarily are calcite and some dolomite. And it's incredible what a few miles can change. For example, my neighbor here in Idaho, when he digs down, it's very rocky. And then when I dig down here on my property, it's more clay, which is a lot easier to dig for projects. And that's only a few miles difference. So there's so many specifics here. It's so location based. And I'm just talking about well or spring water. I'm not even talking about municipal water, which I was on for 3 decades down in San Diego, California. And I've tried several times to make municipal water drinkable. But once you live on a property that has a well or a spring, it's almost impossible to go back. Municipal water is so heavily treated that it's really just tap liquid. It barely resembles natural water. I've had a few shows with the creators of the Analemma wand, the Analemma products, and they talk about energetic pollution of the water, which sounds bogus, but you can do this experiment using their product or use the Infopathy product, which is different. Use a phone or a tablet and you're putting frequencies into the water. It's a totally different type of technology. But I've done that down in San Diego with my family, blind taste tests, some water coming out of the filter without treatment with the Infopathy device, and then another glass beamed with even just 528 hertz, something very basic. And my whole family could tell the difference between the two glasses, much preferring the one that's been treated with the infopathy device. But I think where a lot of people get tripped up in the health community is they go to that stuff first before going to the basics. They go to vortexing and rose quartz and spend $3,500 getting ripped off, not thinking about the filter changes, the filter changing schedule. Are they able to do it themselves, or do they have to pay a plumber every time to change the filter, or convince their spouse or loved one to fiddle around with it, disconnect it, put it in the bathtub? I'm speaking from experience because I've used these types of filters that have the inline cartridges, which is a tube coming in one end and a tube coming out the other end. And they're such a pain to work with. And if you don't stay on changing the filters, depending on how bad your source water is, then the filter won't work. So you might as well just drink the tap if you're not going to keep up with switching the filters out. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this subject, but I just want to make the point that inline cartridges are archaic and a complete disaster. The future is the twist-off cartridges. They are a million times easier to switch out and stay on top of your maintenance. So if you're new to researching this subject, I've been talking about this website for about 10 years now. It's the Environmental Working Group, ewg.org, tap water database. If you pay for your water and you don't own your well, if you have a water bill, you must go to this website to know what's in your water. And I'll talk about the people that don't have a water bill after this, but most people have a water bill, and Environmental Working Group tap water database, put in your zip code, it will pull up roughly the population number that that utility serves, and then it will say contaminants detected. It'll have a total, and then it'll say above that the number that exceed EWG health guidelines, which are stricter than the EPA. So for example, my water here, if I was on municipal, fortunately I'm not, says haloacetic acids, which before I was talking about sulfuric and nitric from car exhaust and burning fossil fuels and industrial operations. But this is another one, haloacetic acids. We have a lot of different acids in our water. Potential effect, cancer, 286 times the EWG's health guideline. So it says this utility, 28.6 parts per billion. The legal limit is 60 parts per billion. So if you look at that, you'd say, oh, good, I'm under it. But the EWG health guideline, according to studies, is 0.1 parts per billion. So that's 286 times greater than 0.1 part per billion. And if you see that, which you most likely will in the report, it'll say in parentheses HAA5, which refers to the 5 different haloacetic acids commonly found in drinking water, and that consists of monochloroacetic acid, dichloroacetic acid, trichloroacetic acid, monobromoacetic acid, and dibromoacetic acid. The EPA considers dichloroacetic acid, DCA, and trichloroacetic acid, TCA, to be potential human carcinogens. In animal studies, they increased the incidence of liver cancer. In human studies, they increased the incidence of bladder cancer. What these are disinfection byproducts formed by the reaction of chlorine, chloramine, chlorine dioxide, and ozone with bromide and organic matter. They are mutagenic, cytotoxic, genotoxic, teratogenic, and carcinogenic. All I need to see was this study by Dad et al. From 2018, Azra Dad. It's titled Haloacetic Acid Water Disinfection Byproducts Affect Pyruvate Dehydrogenase Activity and Disrupt Cellular metabolism. Pyruvate dehydrogenase is how we convert food into energy. It's the enzyme complex that regulates fatty acid and glucose oxidation. It's a really foundational thing for human health. So whenever I see that something disrupts it, and it's something so easy to mitigate, is what we call a low-hanging fruit. It's something that's so easy to solve that requires almost no effort on your end. You don't have to make this massive change in your lifestyle. I like to do stuff like this first and do as much as you can. And these incremental changes, like being aware of these constant exposures that you're getting, you'll start to see incremental changes in your health, in your energy levels, your brain function, your mood. It's called water filtration. And it astonishes me how many people's houses I'll go into, truthers, people that are really aware of what's going on in the world at a really deep level. And I'll go in their kitchen and they have a Berkey filter, a gravity filter on their kitchen countertop. And they have a lot of stuff figured out, but they're putting this pretty much unfiltered water into their body because the Berkey does almost nothing. So if you scroll down on that page, you'll see water filters that can reduce contaminant levels. And it'll list the contaminants that showed up in your report. And then it'll say activated carbon, reverse osmosis, or ion exchange. And it will tell you that ion exchange, like deionization, like we use in the Mitolife filter, takes out radium, 226 radium, 228 radium, also barium. It'll tell you reverse osmosis takes out barium, fluoride, trihalomethanes, haloacetic acids. It'll tell you that activated carbon takes out haloacetic acids and trihalomethanes, but doesn't touch radium, barium, or fluoride. So it's really about using a combination of filtration media. And these little countertop units where you just pour it in the top and it flows through are not removing everything. They're only removing a few of these things, and then you're still getting dosed with whatever's in your water. And this is a really short list compared to most municipalities out there. And when I was in San Diego, the list is a mile long. I've said it before, my first water filter I put on credit. I used, unfortunately, PayPal credit. Later found out they're criminals after they stole a whole bunch of money from me and canceled my account. They're absolutely criminal company. Boycott PayPal. That aside, it was one of the best decisions I ever made because even though I went in debt a few $1,000s, the reward of the mental clarity that I gained from investing in really the quality of my blood, because the water we drink becomes our blood ultimately, that was really the turning point in my life and with my health. So really, when someone says that they can't afford a water filter, what that tells me is they don't value their blood that much. In Chinese medicine, qi and blood are life force, and blood are inseparable and interdependent. It's what transports nutrients, removes waste, transports hormones and oxygen around the body. And you want to pinch pennies and save some money on the quality of that. That's really where I'd start with health, even before changing your diet at all. It's really the quality of your drinking water that is foundational. Another thing I wanted to touch on was the holding tank growing bacteria. This is a common concern that I hear, and a point that's used in the marketing of several other water filtration brands. They'll say never use a reverse osmosis pressurized storage tank under your sink because it will grow bacteria over time. And some companies use that line to market their countertop filter that doesn't remove all acids and contaminants. And then others will use that in their marketing that include an ultraviolet light with their system. But the markup is insane just for that feature. So the truth is there's a lot of factors at play here. It's not just black and white. So is the storage tank in a rental property that's vacant for several months out of the year? Is that storage tank in your vacation home where there's no one using it or an extended period of time? By extended, I mean several months. And yeah, maybe it will grow some bacteria. But more likely scenario is that storage tank in a place where yourself and or multiple people are using it several times a day, constantly having water moving out and into that storage tank. That's a much different story. Another big factor, are you on municipal water where they use chlorine or chloramine? Then you really don't have a bacteria issue because you need some bacteria for them to multiply. Chlorine absolutely obliterates bacteria. So if you don't stay up on maintenance with switching your filter cartridges, especially the inline ones that I talk about that are a pain to change, so you just don't stay on the schedule, then potentially some bacteria could ultimately start growing inside the cartridges themselves. But that takes quite a while, and it's usually when they're just sitting for a long time without water running through them consistently. And keep in mind that these filters themselves actually remove bacteria and other pathogens because the pores are so small in this filtration media that they can't pass through. My setup here at the cabin, we're on a spring, so there is the potential whenever you have well water or spring water to have bacteria. So a lot of people with wells, they'll actually pour Clorox bleach directly into the well to sterilize it a few times a year. We don't do that here. I use ultraviolet light on a whole house basic setup. It's essentially sediment, carbon, and an ultraviolet light that's on 24/7. And the water coming from the spring runs through all of that through a vortexer I use from Dan Winters called the Fractal Water Imploder, then through the whole house analemma, and then to the Mitolife filter. So if there is any bacteria in my water, I'm scrambling its DNA before it even goes into my system. I really think this topic is overblown and sensationalized, like a lot of things are in the natural health world. If it's a real concern, instead of overpaying massively for a water filter because it has that little feature in it, you could go on Amazon or whatever website if you're choosing, and for $50, range all the way up to $200, you can get a UV light that you connect the hoses to. They're just standard hose sizes that we use in the Mitolife filter, and connect that up at the end before it goes up to the faucet. So it's all running through that UV light. You just have to make sure that you have power under the sink. And here at the cabin, we don't have power under the sink. So that is not really practical to have one down there anyway. Fun fact with the Mitolife 7-stage filter, when you kick on the faucet to fill up your water container, the water will travel from the pressurized storage tank to stages 4 through 7, the 2 deionization, remineralization, and coconut carbon. So it's getting actually filtered in between the storage tank and your water spigot. So if there is anything in the storage tank, that should at least grab some of it going through those 2 stages. But again, I don't think it's a huge issue. Really worried about it, just get a little cheap UV light and put that in line right before the faucet after the filtration unit. And if I did have the Mitolife filter, say, hooked up at a retreat center or somewhere that didn't have someone living there full time, that would be a good idea to either put a UV light or just simply drain the tank in between uses of people living there. If you know that the filter is not going to be used for several weeks or several months, all you have to do is turn off the tank, which is water coming into the tank, open the spigot, fill up your container till the water goes to a trickle and stops, and then water your plants with that water, and you're done. I would just caution you to beware of all the marketing out there with drinking water filters. I mean, they'll use these little features to upsell and overprice the product. Before UV, rose quartz, vortexing, whatever energetic process that the water goes through, the most important parts are sediment, KDF, granulated activated carbon, reverse osmosis, deionization, remineralization, and coconut carbon. Those are the stages that we use in the Mitolife filter. And with ours, you can customize it. So take out media, add in other media if you'd like, depending on the source water that you're using. And then whatever you want to do to it after that is up to you. You want to bless the water, run it through some energy device or a combination of energetic devices through a vortexing machine. That's completely up to you. But the foundation before all of that, and I think people are missing the forest for the trees, is really those stages. And if you have all those stages, rest assured that you're going to remove nearly 100% of heavy metals, PFAs, arsenic, lead, chromium, VOCs, pesticides, parasites, pharmaceuticals, fluoride, mercury, different acids, including sulfuric and nitric, and many other contaminants that will show up in the report like I shared at the ewg.org website. I had listeners of the show send in questions, so I'm going to go through those rapid fire style now. Someone asked, what's a cheaper practical water filter for renters? So I'll refer back to my quality of blood rant for this question, but my real answer is don't invest in one if you're not going to go all out for the real thing. Just find your local health food store, find their water dispenser, note if it's been maintained. Usually there's a service history there on it, or you can ask the staff. Make sure they're keeping up with the schedule, switching out the filtration media on time. Invest in some water containers. Usually people go for the BPA-free plastic jugs. There's still some other chemicals in there, like BPS. Years ago, I would use the better bottles, which is used for brewing beer. And the hardcore level, which I was at for a time, was 5-gallon glass carboys, which are really heavy and really dangerous when full. I know from experience, when I lived with my parents and the bottle got slippery, I dropped it and it shattered into a million pieces on the kitchen floor, and I nearly slipped and fell in the water onto all this glass, and it's just really dangerous. So if you can, I would say invest in the better bottles and go that route instead, because they're a lot lighter and a lot safer. And you don't want to lose a limb just because you're trying to get clean filtered water. Last thing I'll say with that question is we are working on a quick connect Mitolife filter for people that are intimidated by the under sink connections, where you'll just be able to connect it to your faucet. So stay tuned for that. Got a lot of questions. What's your tank on the Kangen water system? Alkaline water, ionizers, hydrogen-rich water. So with those water ionizers, most of them are sold under a multi-level marketing company. And so you're really paying for the business opportunity, but there's much better ways to make money. The way I do it on my website, I just promote multiple brands, but none of them have a monthly requirement where I have to keep ordering from them. And the products aren't marked up because you have to pay this downline of people that signed up under you. So that's one aspect of it. It's overpriced just because of the business model that they use. The other aspect to it is that it's acid-free tap water. And so A lot of the proponents of these units will say it's not a water filter, it's making the water electron rich and rich in hydrogen. So they say invest in a pre-filter, but by the time you do that, you're $5,000 in, maybe even $6,000 into this setup, which is just insane. There's a million companies now selling molecular hydrogen H2 tablets. And if you do the math, if you just drop those tablets, usually it's 8 to 10 parts per million, and let that dissolve in your water, that is much more affordable than spending several thousands of dollars on these units. This hydrogen thing is the same as the vortexing, the rose quartz, the energetic structuring of the water. All of that is secondary to having clean water. Someone asked, what do you think of using Soleil in your drinking water? So I did that years ago. What this listener is referring to is salt dissolved in water, effectively making your own saltwater brine solution. And what I used to do is transfer that into a 4-ounce dropper bottle and then dose my water with a small amount of that after it went through the filtration unit. Some people don't like the plain taste of just the magnesium in the water, which is what the Mitolife filter uses. It's corrosive media, so it's injecting various different forms of magnesium in really small amounts, largely just to not make the water aggressive that's been through the RO process. I don't think it's necessary to pre-mix your own salt solution unless you're going to drink it right away. But if you're just sipping it throughout the day, I would just add salt directly to your water bottle after you fill it up with the Mitolife water and just let it dissolve in there, and try different salts. Try Icelandic, which is what I would recommend from Crucial 4. I personally don't add anything to the water. I love the way it tastes. I just drink it straight. But if you're sweating a lot, then maybe it's a good idea to add some sodium chloride to your water. All I do is salt every meal to taste. It's pretty heavy. And then I'll consume some electrolytes throughout the day, whether that's Kintone, hypertonic, or something else. Someone asks pros and cons of drinking distilled water. So this is an interesting one that I have a lot of experience with. I tried several different water distiller brands years ago, and I've actually had the experience at my friend David's house. I was having a sneeze attack years ago, and he had a whole house distiller, and within seconds of drinking a cup of distilled water, it stopped my sneeze attack in its tracks, and that's all that I did, which is pretty incredible. I don't know the mechanism there of what did that, but it definitely worked for me and worked several times after that as well. There is a myth that water distillation removes all contaminants. Distillation does not remove acids, which pass right through that little carbon filter, usually at the spigot, and right into your product water. I always recommend experimentation, so try it out. If you feel great from it, drink it for a little while. It's not what I would do. If I could go back in the past and talk to my past self, I would just skip that step and just go right for the good stuff, which is contaminant-free, acid-free, properly mineralized with magnesium, clean drinking water. Someone asks, what is the best water to grab if you're out and stuck without your water filter, airport travel, etc.? When I'm at the airport, I'm always looking for water that doesn't have magnesium sulfate in it. That's also known as Epsom salts. It's what people use to bathe in. Orally, it acts as a very strong laxative. And for me, it just causes a lot of bloating and digestive discomfort. So that's the number one criteria that I look for. I look for what's added to it as far as minerals. And if it says magnesium sulfate, it's out. If that's all that's available, I'll just buy it and use it just to swallow my vitamin C capsules. but I'll try to limit the amount that I drink. Listener asked, what are the main analytes to request in a water test? So I like the website watercheck.com. They have various different tests, whether you're on municipal, a well, or a spring. They have a specialty test called the Complete RO Screen, which actually looks at a whole bunch of metals. So aluminum, arsenic, barium, beryllium, boron, cadmium, calcium, chromium, copper, iron, lead, lithium, magnesium, manganese, molybdenum, nickel, potassium, selenium, silver, sodium, strontium, thallium, tin, uranium, vanadium, and zinc. So it's really good to know the levels of those in your water, especially if you're living somewhere long term. It also looks at not only just the TDS, but the hardness of the water, the silica content, which is good to know because that will pass through the filters as orthosilicic acid, and silica has incredible benefit for detoxifying aluminum. That's why I have bamboo silica in a lot of the Mitolife products now. Someone asked, thoughts on getting water direct from a spring or direct from a well? That's what I did several years ago, and I think if you're traveling, it's kind of like wine tasting. Once you taste a lot of different waters, you kind of become like a connoisseur, and it is enjoyable to taste different mineral content, and I encourage that. But I don't recommend that for long-term ingestion, especially if you don't know the amount or ratios of minerals found in the water. Another question, spoken intention can change the molecular structure and vibration of the water. Do you agree? Yes, I do agree. But again, I think that is secondary to having physically clean water. Listener asks, more education on water structuring. I recommend going back and listening to my shows with the people at Analemma Water, and also my show with Gerald Pollock. I was intrigued by the idea that the Analemma people introduced to me, that is, that vortexing doesn't work the same as it used to. That is to say that the water doesn't hold the structure as long as it used to, as it was being vortexed through rivers and streams and spiraling because of basically the chaotic noise in the world, whether that's electromagnetic radiation and just emotional pollution from a lot of unwell people. That resonated with me, but then again, they're probably biased because they're selling a product, but I use it. I like it. I use both. I use the whole house vortexing, and I also use the Analemma products. Another question, is filtered well water better than city water that's been reverse osmosis and remineralized? I would have to know more specifics. So filtered well water, what does that mean? What type of filtration are they using? Are they using reverse osmosis and remineralization? Or is it just a carbon block or a sediment filter on the well water? Ideally, you would get a water test and look at the well water and then look at the municipal water and make your decision there. There's just too many specifics for me to answer this question accurately. The short answer would be go by how you feel. Try both. And if you feel better on the quote unquote filtered well water, go with that. Or if you feel better on the RO and mineralized city water, then go with that. RV life suggestions. When I lived in an RV, I used the ceramic water crock on a stand with, as I mentioned, those glass carboys, which was always a workout to turn that upside down and make sure you don't spill it all over the floor. But filling that from your local health food store, water dispenser, I did that for a while, and that's definitely the most affordable way to get clean water. Best meter for checking water quality. So I've been using TDS meters for years. They're really cheap. around $10, $11, $12. And that measures the total dissolved solids in the water, which means the combined content of all the dissolved inorganic and organic substances in the water. And that's a great place to start. A lot of the questions that I receive for this show from listeners are, where do I start? It's really buying a TDS meter, because now you have another set of eyes to see what we can't see, which is the invisible stuff that's floating around in the water that you're drinking. Charles Mayo of the Mayo Clinic was a fan of distilled water because that's probably the best thing they had at the time. And he's quoted as saying, water hardness in organic minerals in solution is the underlying cause of many, if not all, of the diseases resulting from poisons in the intestinal tract. He said these hard minerals pass through the intestinal walls and get into the lymphatic system, which delivers all of its products to the blood, which in turn distributes to all parts of the body. This is the cause of much of human disease. When I stopped drinking hard water, like the product water from a Berkey filter creates, I definitely upgraded my health massively. And that's a fun experiment to do. Switch over from hard water to water that's less than 80 parts per million TDS. And of course, this is just one aspect of it. Just because it's lower TDS doesn't mean it's the optimal water to drink. And kind of a related question, Mountain Valley water, the water in those green bottles, if you can't get a water system, that good water to drink, well, it's chock full of calcium. And the question is, can you absorb it? Back to the Charles Mayo quote, is it inorganic calcium or is it organic calcium? I would only drink that at a pinch, like if you're traveling and you just have to get through for a night or two at the hotel. But if you're home, your everyday drinking water, I would go for filtered water that's gone through the stages that I mentioned earlier in the show. Last question, do you filter spring water? How do you keep the good stuff in there? So as I mentioned before, I do filter the spring water here because it's not primary water, which I would imagine, shout out to Luke's story, less than 1% of the earth has access to primary water, which is water that's never touched the hydrological cycle. So it's essentially the cleanest water on earth. If you want to delve into that, you can go to primarywaterinstitute.org. And they have an interesting quote on the top of the page from Scientific American, which reads, a recent study documented the presence of vast quantities of water locked far beneath the Earth's surface. That study confirmed that there is a very, very large amount of water that's trapped in a really distinct layer in the deep Earth, approaching the sort of mass of water that's present in all of the world's oceans. So if that's true, I would imagine it's similar to the free energy debacle that we're under, running on archaic gas, diesel, and electric cars. And meanwhile, there are these suppressed energy technologies that are being kept away from the public because it would make them too powerful. Maybe the same thing applies to this primary water topic. But until that is released, if and when, I will continue selling and using water filters. And just to circle back to that question, how do you keep the good stuff in spring water? Define good stuff, because all I see is a relatively clean slate. You don't have to deal with pharmaceuticals that people urinated out and then that was chemically treated. But is there something left, even if it's energetic, in the product water? Who knows? I think that's the case. So I don't see good stuff in there. And if you mean minerals, I would like to know the ratio and amounts of the minerals instead of dosing unknown quantities. It would be like if I released a zinc supplement and on the supplement facts on the label, for the amount of milligrams of the zinc, it just was empty. And you'd say, Matt, I need to know the amount of zinc so I know how much I'm taking. Why don't we apply that same logic to our unfiltered water? And usually it's copper that's the issue, and the antidote to copper is zinc. Although copper is an essential mineral, zinc is also essential, and I would say even more so. So if you were on a vegan or vegetarian diet, weren't getting a lot of zinc, compound that with copper in your drinking water that's unfiltered, and you could have created a pretty severe zinc deficiency, which presents in a whole lot of symptoms, largely neurological, mood, mental function, but also recurrent infections, diarrhea, skin issues like acne, dermatitis. I really think that a lot of chronic health conditions are caused by drinking unfiltered water and the mineral imbalance that could create. So I think that covers most of it. I'm not looking to get hydrogen from my water or a ton of minerals. I get my minerals from shilajit, which I take daily, sea salt, really high quality seafood, grass-fed, ideally local red meat, my calcium from raw milk. Right now I'm drinking A2A2 raw bovine sourced milk. I would recommend getting your minerals from salt, shilajit, and high quality animal foods. And ideally, in a perfect world, green leafy vegetables and fruits that you grow yourself on your property. But if not, I'm a big fan of plant foods, fruits, vegetables, and fiber. I would just make sure that you're taking your shilajit and minimizing the juices and just eating them whole. If you want to check out my water filter, you can do so at mitolife.co. Click shop and then the water tab. It recently came back in stock. It's the 7-stage water solution. And I recommend purchasing the premium install kit with it, which comes with all the fittings and tubing that you need to assemble the unit. This was hand-built. It was a labor of love, 7 months delayed, about 2 years in the making. Working with my friend Austin, we finally nailed it. A really clean stainless steel enclosure, the highest quality materials, really easy to service, as I keep emphasizing the importance of, because your filter is only as good as the cartridges, and staying up on that maintenance, I really can't repeat that enough. It's super essential. And on the product page, you'll find the user manual PDF. And on page 17, that's where you'll find the cartridge change schedule, because that's probably a question that you're asking. How often do I have to replace these filters? The answer to that is it depends on your source water. Are you on municipal? Are you on well? Are you on a spring? So for most people that are on municipal sourced water, it's likely going to be the more rigorous filter changes. So for stage 1 and 2, it's 6 to 12 months. 6 months on the more aggressive end, 12 months if you're on well or spring water, most likely. The RO unit, that's 12 to 24 months. The 2 primary and secondary deionization cartridges, which remove the acids, that's 6 to 12 months. The remineralization cartridge is 12 to 24 months. And then the coconut carbon is 6 to 12 months. I truly believe that this is the best drinking water filter on the market. And we're really just getting started. As I mentioned, we're planning on making a slightly smaller unit that you can connect direct to the faucet if you move a lot, or you're renting and you're afraid to drill into the piping under the kitchen sink. But just to assure you, if you are, I was renting a place and I slightly altered the drain, one hole. You could plug it when you move. It's really not that big of a deal. The owner will probably not even tell, and it won't affect the function of the kitchen drain whatsoever. And then on that same website, you can click on the living tab, check out our shampoo and conditioner and grounding sheets. If you've never slept grounded, buy the grounding rod kit, pick the size of your bed, throw that out your window. Hopefully you're on the first floor or close to the ground, and hammer that, or with a mallet, pound that ground rod into the earth. Get direct skin contact. So put that as the base layer that your skin is going to be touching. So basically you're sandwiched in between the grounding sheet and your first sheet, and you'll be amazed at the depth of sleep that you get sleeping connected to the earth like that. You're basically tapping in to this massive battery and getting trickle charged with electrons all night long. That's how I sleep here at the cabin. I have the filtered king sheet, and I really can't sleep ungrounded anymore. I feel the difference when I do. If you click on the wellness tab, you can check out all of the various supplements that we have. The Encephalon product is one of our newest, and I keep getting rave reviews about that one. The main ingredient is Brain Fit, which is a microalgae extract from Phyodactylum tricornitum. And we mix that with phosphatidylserine and ginkgo biloba. And it is a super boost for the brain. It's been shown in 7 preclinical trials to improve cognitive performance, improve short and long-term memory, enhance learning, inhibit lipid peroxidation in the brain, thus reducing oxidative stress in the brain. It's a really powerful product. I take 4 of those a day, but I would recommend starting slow because it's potent for a lot of people. So start with 1 or 2 and see how you feel. Then Christmas is already coming up here before we know it. So if you want to shop for family and friends, head over to matt-blackburn.com and check out all the products I have listed there. Those are products that I use myself, and most of them have discount codes where you can save a little bit. And also check out my CLF protocol, which is my overall philosophy about human health. If you want to delve deeper, I have something called the Mitolife Academy on YouTube. It's $15 a month, and you gain access to 2 private videos every month and a live Q&A the last day of every month. And then every Friday, I release a new show here on Mitolife Radio. That's all for today. I'll see you guys next week. Stay supercharged.